This is The Recap, a weekly reflection on the sermons of Fellowship Baptist Church in Mainville, Ohio, seeking to help you make Jesus essential in every aspect of your life. I'm your host this week, Ryan Land, and I'm here with the preacher of this week's sermon, Brent Wilson. Again.
Welcome back, Ryan.
Welcome back, Brent. We're going to talk about this a lot.
Yeah.
But I want to get a feel for this. We're talking about worldview. We're going to talk a lot about like movies, art, media. I want to know. You talked about this reject, redeem, receive. Also, I jumped right in. Shout out Jacob, did a great job hosting last week.
He did.
So if you listen, if you didn't listen to last week because the host wasn't here, the usual host, go back, give it a listen. It's a great episode. Thankful for Jacob. Okay, my icebreaker question.
Okay,
we talk about reject, receive, redeem. Mm-hmm. What is your favorite movie or book or whatever it may be, TV show that is not particularly Christian, was not intended to be Christian, but has Christian imagery, Christian themes, Christian ideas that you can redeem sort of in the story or the movie or whatever it may be.
All the movies just left my brain. The one thing that jumps out to me, and this one's a little, it's not overtly, but How to Train Your Dragon.
Okay.
Have you seen it?
I've never seen it.
Oh, I don't want to spoil it for you.
Okay.
I cry every time.
Okay. But just give me some broad.
It's
paint with drugs.
There is a division between father and son.
Okay.
And at the end, the father, it's kind of reversed because the father's the one making the mistake.
Yeah.
But the father in humility comes and embraces his son and it's reconciled.
Oh, that's good.
Similar to The Hobbit, the first one, when Thorin is so mad that Bilbo's come with him, and then he's like, "But I'm so glad you came."
Yeah, because he's the one that
it's just like relational. I know what it is. The one that is so over the top, and I mean, obviously they didn't mean to do it, but is the dragon movie? Raya, the Last Dragon.
Yeah, it's like. The world's broken. It starts with this prologue.
Yeah, the prologue, and it's not only is the world broken, but all of the nations have been divided. Right, so Tower of Babel, and then everything's broken, and creation itself is falling apart. And then at the end, not only does the hero sacrifice herself to fix the problem, and I think she doesn't ultimately die. There's kind of a slight resurrection kind of thing, but then the creation is restored. And all of the nations come back together and are one again. I'm like, bro, this is the Bible.
So that's similar for me. Animated Disney movies. Yeah. I remember, it's not my favorite movie or it's not my, whatever. But I do remember I remember being in the theater watching it and just kind of I'm looking around are y'all getting this? Do y'all get it? Is Moana? When at the end, there's the evil monster.
Yeah.
And you find out that the evil monster actually just needed a new heart.
Yeah.
And the new heart restored creation.
Yeah.
So that was one of the ones that I thought was that is so very clearly Christian without intending to, because it's this movie with demigods, and all this stuff going on, and then for it to be actually for creation to be restored, something needs to be given a new heart.
Yeah.
I was just duh. It's I figured it out.
Yeah. No, that's good. Let me ask you a follow-up question about a movie, because this is what I thought you were going to ask. What movie or show or whatever had has something going on in it that people were missed, like a theme, or it was making a point and people loved the movie but had no idea the point it was trying to make?
Oh. That's a great question. I can only give one example from recent, in recent memory, and it's not that everyone missed the point. It's that this very publicized person missed the point.
Okay.
But so in Harrison Butker's commencement speech that got so much virality and everyone was sharing or whatever, this was not in like a part that made anybody upset but me. It was like I read the entire, everyone's mad about it, so I go read the entire transcript. And I don't like the stuff he says about women, probably not helpful. Like I think the media spun it. And anyway, the thing that really got under my skin was he talked about the Martin Scorsese movie Silence.
Oh yeah,
which is about these Jesuit priests that go to Japan. And he like tries to make the point. It implies that the point of the movie is like the best way to be Catholic is to die holding on to your faith, but being quiet about it. And I'm like, bro, the movie is about missionaries who go and get martyred for trying to spread the faith. I'm like, if you thought the point of the movie was being silent, like about your faith, you missed it.
You missed the point.
Like you're looking for something to be mad about. Like the movie's amazing. It's pretty violent. It's pretty dark. But it is so good and so overtly Christian. It's very Catholic because Scorsese's a very devout Catholic. But that dude was trying to make like the liberal media was trying to make Catholicism. The best version of a Catholic is a silent Catholic. And I'm like, this is a movie made by a Catholic about Catholicism. You missed it. Yeah. So that was my my thing.
So the one that comes to my mind isn't Christian particularly, but just like not being able to read what the movie's trying to tell you is Avatar.
The Last Airbender?
No.
The Blue People.
Blue People.
James Cameron,
Avatar. The first one. Yeah. You've got the people from Earth coming to mine all the minerals or whatever, and we're all on the team of the blue guys, right? Potentially. So at the end of the movie,
they're arguably the protagonists.
They're Pocahontas.
Jake Sully is the guy. He's the Avatar. He's the human that crosses over into
But like at the end, everyone like stands and cheers. And Dr. Moore said this is what made me think about this. Is that they didn't realize they were standing to cheer for the fall of America.
Yeah.
It's like we are the guys on the ships coming to mine all the stuff. Right. It's like we're the invaders. And like we're cheering for our own downfall and don't even realize it.
So all of that to say, it's like this is all an outflowing of our worldview, our ability to parse, our ability to think through what stuff is saying to us. So the gospel changes everything is what we're talking about. And so particularly this week, and you mentioned in your sermon, like this is very cerebral, but it's because like I think, bare bones point of the sermon is like the gospel changes our minds. It changes how we think about this thing. The verse you pulled out, Romans 12:2, what we talked about at VBS all week. It's like, do not be conformed to this age, be transformed by the renewing of your mind. It's something in your mind. And so first off, before we, you gave us kind of 3 tools, but first let's just talk a little bit let's go through your definition of worldview and let's talk about that a little bit. It's a very complicated thing. So give us your definition of worldview and let's kind of unpack that a little bit.
So I said a worldview is the lens by which we judge or interpret the world both consciously and unconsciously. And I said consciously and unconsciously because there are times where we're really deliberate and we're really thinking about how do I think about this? How do I parse this thing? But then there are other times where we are making judgments and parsing and doing these things without thinking about it, which is kind of point of my question, right? It's like people are doing this thing and there's no. That's why I'm kind of making the chick flick argument. It's like we are receiving and it's forming us, and we've not really engaged with what's actually happening in my heart about this. And so we the lens. So think glasses. I was playing pickleball this morning. Someone said, I think it was Nate said this. It's like we need to have Jesus tinted glasses. And so it's like we got to have our Jesus tinted glasses on by which we judge and interpret the world around us.
Yeah, and I think it's important to note that's like it's not something it's not a stagnant thing like our worldview. It's like something that every day is getting sort of challenged and morphed, and like by whatever we're reading or whatever we're seeing online or whatever we're watching or whatever relationship
conversations
and so it's like it's not like this set. We can't make a list, right, of things like here's the biblical worldview or the gospel worldview or the Christian worldview or whatever. It's like each person has a worldview individually, and it's morphing and it's changing and it's fluid by all these things around us. And so what we're saying, what Paul's saying, is like your mind is going to be morphed and changed. Make sure it's morphed and changed by the gospel, not by the things around you.
Right.
And so I think one thing we're going to talk about a lot as we go through these tools is like a lot of times we take our worldview and we apply it to other things, right? And so it's kind of like a rubric that all the information we're taking in is getting filtered through. But then also like the reverse side of that, our worldview affects the things we do. It's like the worldview like applied.
Yep.
And so as we go through these tools, it's like you're gonna hear us talk about both things, like both how do we apply our worldview to other people's worldview or to other things, and then how do we, as Christians, as people who've been changed by the gospel, how do we live out the worldview that is shown to us in the Bible?
Yeah.
So let's go into these three tools you've given us, and we've got a couple of topics that we're gonna like filter through each of these and see how they affect.
Okay.
So first, talk to me about the sacred secular divide or lack thereof.
Yeah. So really, this tool is really to set the stage to say there are not spiritual things that are, hey, these are really sacred, important, and holy spaces, and then everything else. But rather, God created the whole world good, and so everything is sacred, or at least has the sacredness behind it. So it may be fractured, it may be perverted, it may be twisted, but at its root, it is. And so I said this as well, all truth is God's truth, right?
Yeah.
No matter the source, no matter the topic. So math, 2 + 2 = 4, it's God's truth. Science, it's God's truth. Whatever it is, it's not irrelevant to the Christian. These are God's truths. And I love this quote by Johannes Kepler. And so, you've heard of the Kepler, was it telescope or satellite?
Something like that. I think it's a satellite.
And he's the father of celestial mechanics. And it's he was, as he studied the universe, thinking
Which that sounds like some kind of wizard to me, by the way, like the father of celestial mechanics.
I don't know what that means, honestly.
That sounds not right.
But thinking God's thoughts after him, right? And so has big implications for work, right? Whatever we're doing, whether we're tilling a garden, whether we're plumbing, electrical, doing the stock market, whatever. It's like, hey, we are doing sacred work. It really goes back to Genesis 2, and that God is telling us to take dominion of the world, to cultivate it, take what is chaos and bring beauty and order out of it. And so it's also interesting when you think God created a garden, but God has the world ending in a city. He doesn't take us back to the garden.
Yeah.
He takes us to a city. And so that we know that, therefore, that means like we're intended to build. I love the book Heaven by Randy Alcorn, and he talks about how if God allowed fallen humanity to put a man on the moon, what is he going to allow his redeemed humanity to do? And he talks about going to the next galaxy over. And so we're going to build and we're going to cultivate. It's still a new creation. And so that just means that all of these things are a part of the Christian life.
Yeah.
And it's not, it's interesting. The Reformers changed this. So the Catholics back in 500 years ago said that a vocation was church work. If you were a priest or worked in the church, that was a vocation. Everyone else just had jobs. And the Reformers said, no. Everyone who works has a vocation. And it's all, serving the Lord, no matter what our work is. So.
Yeah. And it's like, I think you told me this. I think it's like a comedian actually that talks about it, but like how men's brains are like all these different filing cabinets.
Yeah.
And it's like, you can put your sports in one filing cabinet and your family in one filing cabinet and your, whatever in every filing cabinet. And it's like, I think those, you think about in your brain, I think sometimes we think, all right, we've got our like Christian filing cabinet and it's like all our stuff we think Christianly about goes in there. And then there's like our regular life filing cabinet. Right. And it's like, that's where like our sports go and our media goes and our politics goes and our whatever goes. But then it's like our Bible study that goes in our Christian filing cabinet. And it's like, we make these distinctions that don't have, where there is no distinction.
Right.
And it's like, and not to say that there aren't things that aren't sacred, right? Like the sacraments, the ordinances, right?
Yeah.
It's like, this is a little bit of a continuum, right? To say that like everything's sacred. It's like, well, if everything's sacred, nothing is.
Yeah. There are things that are more sacred.
Yeah. And so it's like, well, if everything's sacred, then we can just do the Lord's Supper with our Cool Ranch Doritos and Mountain Dew.
Yeah.
And it's like, we would say like, well, no, actually there's like, there's specificity.
Yeah.
It's like we can do
There are things that are Christian and there are things that are not Christian.
Yeah. And so it's like, what I don't want you to hear say is like nothing special, right? Or nothing sacred, right? There, it's nothing sacred anymore. It's like, but there are not things in the world that are unaffected by the gospel.
Yeah.
Like one way to say that might be that the gospel changes everything.
Yeah. And it's just that God cares about all these things.
Yeah.
Right? It's like in one sense we could say, hey, the church building isn't sacred.
Yeah.
In a sense, like it's not special. But when the people of God get together in that building, it becomes that.
Yeah.
But architecture is a sacred thing. Building is sacred. And so there's nuance. There.
But so what I didn't want people to hear is just like, nothing sacred, nothing special, nothing matters. But it is this, this idea that everything you do, right, from the moment you wake up to the time you go to sleep at night, is either lived in response to who God is and what He's done for you, or in direct obedience.
Yeah, and I said this in the sermon, and I didn't make a big deal about it, but I think this is one of the places we see this most often, or it's lived out, but it's lived out wrongly. It's not lived out in a Christian worldview. Is that we allow our politics to shape our Christianity, or we just divorce them. Instead of letting our Christianity influence our politics. We vote along party lines, or we just listen to them, and that's the truth, instead of allowing the Bible and the scriptures to determine how we think. And we should be the more nuanced than anyone.
Well, so you say, I think, so one of the things I want to think about in this is like art, media, the news. How does the sacred secular divide, or lack thereof, sort of help us in that? And one thing is like when it comes to the news, is like you talk about all truth being God's truth. Well, it's like, well, then that means it's like there's no secular news media and Christian news media. It's like we just want people to report the truth. And so we should be vigilant in seeking out the truth of something, not just the spin, not just what our guy that we like says. But it's like,
so I mean, without naming names,
someone
who no longer goes to our church, you pointed out.
On Facebook.
On Facebook, someone posted an article that was, clearly fake news about a politician on the left
who wanted to destroy it said they wanted to destroy the Constitution or something.
And you gently pointed out, hey man, good news. This isn't true. This is fake news. Someone made this up.
Isn't it a good thing that representatives in Congress don't want to destroy the Constitution?
Yeah. And that person, instead of going, oh, thanks, I didn't realize this wasn't true. I still don't necessarily agree with the person. That doesn't mean you have to love and agree with the person. But this instead just, well, you are obviously uninformed, right? Like I'm going to believe this clearly fake news article. And so, totally an issue.
So talk about like movies, TV, music. Like how does this lack of sacred secular help us have a Christian worldview, gospel worldview in relation to those things?
In relation to which things?
Any art we intake, music, movies, TV. Well, how does the sacred secular divide help us have a gospel worldview about those things?
Yeah, well, I think it was popular in the 90s to when you got saved, you took all your secular CDs and burned them. Right? It's like, hey, we got to get rid of all of our AC/DC and all of our Eagles and all, whatever. We got to burn all our music.
In my youth group, we had the poster on the wall that was like,
the Christian version of that.
Yeah, it was like, do you like this secular band?
Yeah.
Well, it's like, then listen to this Christian band instead. It's like they sound like them.
Yeah, and so in one ways, it's actually like, hey, no, the Eagles are actually good. Like the quality of the musicianship is actually good. The vocals, the lyrics, we've got to weigh them. Some of them are good. Some of them are meh. Some of them are maybe bad. And so it's like lyrics are more complicated because it's like, what are they saying? What's the message? But secular music is good or potentially good. Movies, but whatever. It's like, okay, what's being communicated? What's being said? Just because it's not Christian, just because it's not a movie about the Bible
or a song about a song about Jesus.
We're talking about Raya the Last Dragon. It's like it's just incredibly Christian. You think Harry Potter? People who are so mad about I really wanted to bring up Harry Potter in my sermon. I just didn't have a chance to. But people who are so mad about Harry Potter, it's like, have you seen the end? You can't see the end and not think that either she's a Christian or it's just overtly Christian.
Yeah.
And so it's like we get hung up on particular details.
Yeah.
There was a gay character, or there's witchcraft. And therefore we write off all of the good because of one thing that we may get hung up on. It's like, instead, let's then take the whole thing and say, hey, stories are sacred. The whole Bible is a story. Stories are good. And what does this teach us? What's good, what's bad?
And so that's one thing I was going to say, about, the Bible's a story. God's a creator, and it's Tolkien that talks about, that we're sub-creators, like in response to God's creation. And so like in some sense, every filmmaker, every author, every musician, right, is living out the fact that they're made in the Imago Dei.
Yeah.
Whether what they're making is honoring God or not.
Yeah.
And so starting from that point when it comes to art or music or TV or whatever is, I think, helpful, because you think this person is trying to do something that is good, right? And then like their own thoughts, their sinful hearts, right? Christian or non-Christian, like that's always going to happen,
and
right?
And,
So it's like there are there are quote unquote Christian movies that are probably like unhelpful, right? They're like, like we should, they distort the way we think about Christianity in a negative way.
Sure.
But that it gives us a proper assumption, I think, when it comes to someone at work that we struggle with, that we think is, it's like we can start from this place. It's like, it makes it easier to love them. It makes you assume better about them. It gets you to a place of charity faster when in a world that's so, surrounded or engulfed in like wanting to go fight the fight. It's like you say it's like, there's like, we go after those little things. It's like, what if we started from a place of charity?
Yeah.
So it's like, we see the good that they're trying to show like through the story or through the music.
Yeah. Reject the bad and receive or redeem the good parts and celebrate those.
There's a great visual artist that I love. His name's Makoto Fujimura, and he frequently will tweet, like he'll quote tweet articles that call him a Christian artist, and he'll say, "I'm not a Christian artist. I'm an artist." Right? It's like he rejects this notion that his art is any more holy or Christian or whatever because he has belief in the gospel.
Right.
He's actually saying, I'm just an artist.
Yeah.
And the things that I do are influenced by my belief and my faith in Christ.
Kind of like Switchfoot.
Yeah.
Switchfoot, they're Christians. They're not writing worship music.
Yeah.
Their music's not like overtly about Jesus.
Hey, do you like the Dave Matthews Band? Try out Switchfoot.
Yeah.
I don't know if that would be
So it's like Switchfoot is not a Christian band. They're a band and they're full of Christians.
Yeah. And so I think saying like, that movie came from the secularists, so we have to hate it.
Yeah.
And this movie came from Christians, so we have to love it.
Right.
It's like, okay, like this may get me in trouble, but I'm going to say it anyway.
Say it.
The Sound of Freedom.
I have not seen it, but
Me neither. But I could not find an accurate like review, or because it got so mixed up in this like, well, it's made by people so people on the left did this too. They were like, we don't like the predispositions of the people that made it, so it must suck. Right. And it's like, but the people on the right were like, I don't care if it's a good movie or not. I don't care what its message is. I don't care how much the ticket is. Like, I'm going to go see it because I like the people that made it.
Yeah.
It's like, so it's like, there's just no like fair critique of it, but there's plenty of Christian movies that are Christian that are bad.
You're saying just like quality?
Like quality wise.
Yeah.
And so it's just like, we should not just be like, yeah, you should go see the movie.
Can I have a hot take?
Because it's Christian.
Let me have a hot take.
Give me a hot take.
Facing the Giants, bad movie.
Agreed.
Josh is over here mad.
Like
he loves
the acting is terrible. I'll be honest.
The message is fine.
I don't like any of those movies. Like those, the guys, those brothers. I think it's poor film.
Cheesy.
I think it's poor filmmaking.
Yeah.
Right. And it's like, and I can have that, and you can have a different opinion than me. That's fine. But what I don't think we should do is just say, hey, rah, it's a Christian movie, so we should all go see it.
Yeah. So it's good.
Yeah. So it's good, right?
Yeah.
And so like, but
it's like, that doesn't mean the messaging is necessarily off point, right? They might have a good message.
Yeah.
But it's like, when Christians do something in the world, we should do it with excellence, and we should make the quality of it shouldn't be lower because it's on a Christian budget or whatever. It's like we got to make it just as good, if not better, than everybody else, because we have a God who's made things beautiful and good, and we want to do that like Him.
Yeah, and the great theologian Hank Hill
That's
said,
a Christian worldview lived out.
Oh, yeah. The great theologian Hank Hill once said, Bobby, Christian rock and roll doesn't make Christ better. It just makes rock and roll worse.
yeah, for sure.
So, it's like, let's just like
make good music.
Yeah. And intake the good music, right? It's like, we don't have to just love whatever's on K-Love. Right. We don't have to just love whatever, because it's Christian, right? We can love things that are well crafted, that are well meaning, that are beautiful, that are good, that have elements of truth to them. Yeah. And say like there's an element in which, like, when I'm watching or listening to a great song, I'm like, there's this is holy. It's not really.
Right.
But there's like this element that's like, this is so transcendent, maybe is the right word.
Yeah.
And so just like eliminating those categories to say, rah, rah, this thing's Christian, and boo, hiss, this thing's secular. It's like eliminating that helps us appreciate the world around us and think more fairly.
And what we're doing when we get sucked in like that is we are allowing other people to suck us into a paradigm that they have created.
Yes.
And we got to say, we reject all of y'all's nonsensical paradigms, and we're going to judge this thing on its own
face.
merits.
And we can come to different conclusions on Facing the Giants, right? Some people may I love the movie and the acting is fine and the writing is fine and the plot elements are fine, whatever. It's like, and we can come to different conclusions on that, but we can't say Silence is bad because it was made by the secular Hollywood elites, and Facing the Giants is good because it was made by two Christians. Yeah. That's not a fair critique.
Right.
I think that's where we're getting to.
I quoted John Calvin, the great Protestant reformer, who said, all truth is from God, and consequently, if wicked men have said anything that is true and just, we ought not to reject it, for it has come from God.
Yeah.
And so when, I don't even know who directed or wrote the Dragon movie we were talking about, but it's like...
Me neither.
Let's just assume they're crazy atheists or whatever. That doesn't mean all of the truth that seep throughout the movie is
lost.
Untrue. It's like... They are connected. They are sub-creators, whether they realize it or not. They're creating the image of God, and this truth just spills out with them, and they don't even realize. They don't see it like we do. And so we gotta go, oh man, y'all are missing. Y'all made this thing, and you missed what you've made.
Yeah. Quickly, let's talk about the sacred secular divide in finances.
Okay.
How does eliminating that paradigm, secular sacred, how does that change the way we think about money, how we use our money, how we save our money, spend our money, whatever it may be?
Yeah, when you think money is just a secular thing that you have to do, you're going to fall into many traps, one of two extremes. On the one hand, potentially you begin to hoard it. And you got this.
It's your security blanket.
Becomes my security. If I have enough money in my 401k or my savings account, I feel better. On the other extreme, you begin to use money as an outlet to fill the void in your heart. And you're like, oh, when I'm stressed, I buy stuff. When I'm anxious, I buy stuff. Well, when something new comes out, I buy it. I got to have the newest, the biggest, the shiniest, whatever. And it's like you're trying to make it satisfy you. Well, both of those things are wrong. When you begin to see that finances are a sacred thing, and you use our language, you make Jesus essential in your finances. Well, now all of a sudden, it can't be my security, and it can't be the thing that brings me happiness. And so now I can live.
It frees you.
It frees you to live in wisdom, to spend appropriately, to save appropriately, and just to think about it as a steward. That actually God has given me this as a gift to steward, as a manager for Him, and to use it wisely.
Yeah. The other way I think people do this is they think, I gave my 10%, that's the sacred percent.
Oh, that's fascinating. Yeah.
And then I've got my secular that I can do
90.
Not really, but it's like my 90% that I can do whatever I want with. That's it. So I give my 10%, my sacred percent to God. It's like I always give that, and maybe and that percentage can be different than for people, right? It's like 15, 20, whatever. And then we think, but then the rest of it's mine.
Yeah.
That's wrong.
100%.
All of it is God's.
Yeah.
Right. And so that changes how we spend our money. It changes how we save our money. Right. Yeah. And so the same thing can be said about your possessions, like our giving prayer, right? Or relationships, time, possessions, money, right? All of those things. Yeah. Like we can't split it between your time at church is not your sacred time of the week.
Yeah.
Actually, all of your week
All your
is
time
sacred.
is sacred. Ooh,
Yeah.
come on.
And so being able to think about that stuff, one, it frees you.
Yeah.
I think you're right. Like it frees you to use your money in certain ways.
Yeah.
But it also, I think, gives you an accurate responsibility, the burden of responsibility of your finances.
Yeah.
That's like, hey, God has actually blessed you with this.
Yeah.
How are you going to use it?
Yeah.
God has blessed you with these children. How are you going to raise them? God has blessed you with this amount of free time. How are you going to use it? For yourself?
Yeah.
Or are you going to use it in faith and obedience to Jesus?
Right. So me and Nathan were talking about this week, actually, and I want to hear your thoughts on this.
Okay.
Because the Bible doesn't really ever give us a clear economical way to think about money. Like it doesn't promote capitalism. If anything, the Bible might seem to suggest.
You're saying like an economic system?
Yeah. Okay. So if anything, it kind of suggests socialism, at least among the church in Acts. But when you kind of use this paradigm of creation, fall, redemption, and consummation, it's like there's no monetary system in creation, right? Like it's just Adam and Eve, right? They're not buying and selling goods.
There's not going to be any money in heaven.
And in the new creation,
there's going to be no money.
It doesn't seem like the gold has become pavement.
Yeah. That's the point. That's the point of the text. I actually don't think there will literally be gold pavement. I think they're saying it'll be as like money and gold will be as
worthless as
the concrete road. Or dirt.
Yeah. And so in new creation, we're us, for lack of a better term, a socialist society. Like we're all sharing and caring for one another, right? We have what we need, in a sense.
Yeah.
Don't push that too far. But so from just trying to use that paradigm, it's like, okay, well, in the fall, now we've got to have some sort of system. I think it's Lewis who talks about how capitalism and democracy are not the best, so they're just the best in a fallen world. And so it's like we can maybe think about that from in the fall and redemption. It's like, hey, these are potentially at least the best we've come up with for now, but what we're headed toward isn't this.
Yeah, well, it's very clear, like democracy is not the best form of government.
Kingship is.
Monarchy.
Yeah.
Absolute monarchy is the best. The problem is there's no good absolute monarch except for Jesus.
Right.
And so it's like when we live in the absolute monarchy under King Jesus, like that's the best.
So bring this back to movies. You think about the first Avengers movie when Loki is
you were made to be ruled.
Yeah,
he's right. Down. That's the best part of that scene.
Yeah.
And when he comes down, he's like, is this not your natural state?
Yeah.
You were made to be ruled.
So he's right.
And he's right. And then that guy stands up and he says, but not by men like you.
Yeah.
And he says, there are no men like me. And the guy says, there were always men like you.
Yeah.
And then Captain America comes down and kicks Loki's butt. And it's awesome. So, so I think eliminating those, and I think this is a hot button issue right now. You talk about like abortion policy.
Yeah.
People think, well, I have this belief about abortion, and people do this on the left and the right. I have this personal belief about abortion, but that doesn't make winning policy. So in actually the realm of policy or politics, I'm going to put my personal belief about abortion aside so I can win the election.
Yeah.
That's wrong-headed. That's anti-gospel, right? To put your convictions aside for pragmatic gain is there's no example of that in the early church. There's no example of that in the New Testament. And so when people on the left who are Catholic have this personal belief about abortion and say, but I'm going to put that aside because I don't want to make it the policy of the land. It's like, that's wrong. Right. But when people, now we're seeing it on the right. People on the right are saying like, hey, I have this personal belief, but to actually win the election, we're going to put that aside and focus on these other things. It's like, I think both things, we have to reject both things. Yeah. It's like we need to be pro-life people no matter what. Yeah.
Either killing babies is right or wrong.
Yes.
And you've got to, it can't be wrong, but we'll just let the states decide.
Yeah. It's like my personal belief is that it's wrong. That's that's my sacred belief, right? That's my Christian thinking. But in the open world of politics, how that's applied is like, well, that's like less important.
I mean, imagine applying that to some other issue.
Slavery.
Well, I'm against slavery.
Or just murder. Just murder. Yeah. It's like I'm personally against people being murdered.
But we'll let the states decide if it's okay.
In the realm of politics, I'm gonna let people get murdered just so we can win elections. I want to legalize that. It just falls apart. Yeah. And so we've got to, if the Bible is declaring something, we're saying like, hey, this is a conviction we as Christians have in our worldview. Yeah. We have to apply that consciously. We have to apply that consistently. We have to apply that in every realm.
Yeah.
We can't put it aside for gain, for worldly gains.
Right.
All right, let's talk about this second tool: creation, fall, redemption, restoration. This is like a 30,000 foot view of the gospel story.
Yep.
This is Chandler calls the gospel in the air,
Yep.
right? So this is how the gospel sort of communally affects the entire world, right? And so, how does in some of the things we've already talked about, movies, politics, money, whatever it may be, how does this paradigm help us build a gospel worldview?
Yeah, well, it's giving us some clear answers to things. So when the world is created perfect and it's good, we know what things should be like.
Yeah.
When we see a movie and we see something twisted, we can say, oh, that's twisted, because we also know what the problem is. We know how sin is twisted and perverted everything. And so we can see the kernel of goodness, and then we can see how it's been twisted or perverted, right? And then in the redemption category, we know the only solution to how this thing has been corrupted is not whatever else, whatever somebody might say. It's true love or something. That the answer is Jesus. And that may not come to fruition in maybe a movie we're watching.
Yeah.
They say the answer is something else. We go, oh, I see the kernel of truth there. I see how it's perverted, and I see that they've given the wrong answer. And then to know that how it's going to be fixed.
Well, like in your Raya and the Last Dragon example, it's like they get the answer right. Like the person is wrong. Like Jesus doesn't show up in Raya and the Last Dragon and die and get resurrected. But a character dies. Like there's brokenness in the world. There's brokenness in the people. And a character dies and is resurrected. And then there's harmony. There's unity. Yeah. And that's like the gospel story.
Yeah.
And so
or
it's
Harry
like,
Potter.
Yeah. And
Evil
so
is vanquished through death and resurrection.
finding this theme in stories is very easy because humans at their core know what the problem is and know what the solution is. Romans 1 and 2. Yeah. And so it's like we know in our hearts, we know in our minds that we're broken, that we're messed up, and we know that someone else has to pay the price for us, that we can't do it. We're too messed up to do it. And only then through the payment on our behalf can we have unity? Can there be wholeness? Can there be communal life?
And that's where movies portray different aspects of God's story. That's not always the entire thing.
Yeah.
Right. So like Jurassic Park is a great example of like a fall story.
Yeah.
Right. Like how did everything go wrong in the world? Well, the Bible tells us how everything went wrong in the world, but movies and stories are trying to grasp at that. Think of the whole prequels of the Star Wars. Where did this great evil Darth Vader come from? Well, we're going to tell you.
Yeah.
How did dinosaurs begin to take over this island? Well, man's hubris did not stop to ask the question, not only can we do this, but should we? And so there are false stories, there are redemptive stories, there are good versus evil, there are romance, there are stories about evil because there's actually evil in the world. I talked about Lost a couple of weeks ago, and it's like Lost is this echoing and longing for Eden. It's this, when they get off the island and want to go back, why would you want to go back to this deserted island?
Yeah.
It's because it gave you the sense of Eden that you've always longed for. And so it's like, we could watch Lost and just turn our brains off and as be amusement and not see it. Or you could see, what's that new show? Yellowstone.
It's Edenic. Yeah.
Yellowstone is Edenic. So what do we got to do? We have to protect Eden at all costs. This home, this ranch that's been passed down from generation to generation is the thing that makes us happy. We have to hold on to it. Now, how is it perverted and twisted by sin? Well, they kill people.
Yeah, the way they protect Eden is actually through evil. Yeah.
And that it's not actually Eden. It's it's a longing for that. And so using this paradigm, we can see what is the kernel of goodness, what is twisted, and how we should actually get it back, and what are we headed toward.
Yeah. And I think, you think about, like the news, or you think about politics, like all of our policy is aimed at restraining evil in the world.
Yeah.
It's like, so we know people's ultimate need, the thing they need the most is an answer to their sin, is an answer to their brokenness. But that doesn't mean that when we just go like, hey, let's go legislate everybody be Christians, and that solves all their problems, because that doesn't make Christians, it makes pretend Christians. Yeah. And so then what do we do is like, well, we want to restrain evil. And so abortion is a restraining of the evil that has been unleashed on the world. Immigration, right? Immigration policy, a strict immigration policy, not letting people run across borders freely is restraining evil. Like evil things happen when you just let people run over the border. But that's a tricky thing, right? Because we also want we want to offer people redemption. We want to offer people safety. We want to offer people lives where they can be fulfilled and have jobs and not be hunted down by drug lords, right? And
feed their families.
Yeah, and so it's like finding in our policy, right, is both about addressing the fall, but offering people a path to redemption.
I've often said, and being critical of Trump's build the wall thing, it's like, hey, let's build the wall, and then let's build big beautiful gates, a
big beautiful door,
and say, come all who are weary and heavy laden, and we will give you rest.
Yeah,
like isn't like our this is not really about policy, but it's like our what do you call that? Not foreign policy, but immigration policy could be incredibly Christian, where it restrains evil, but then invites in those who are willing to come and embrace America and the American dream or whatever.
Yeah. Yeah, I think so. And I think, another thing is like, why is the news always so negative? People say that, why is the news always so negative? Why is the news always so negative? And it's like, well, because the world's messed up.
Yeah.
And it's like, we don't want to pretend that we live in this utopia.
Yeah.
Right? It's like, we don't want to pretend that bad stuff doesn't happen in the world. Yeah. Our eyes actually need to be open to the realities of evil so that we can help address them. And so I think this is helpful to think through that. We're living through the gospel story, right? We're living through the creation, fall, redemption, and restoration of God's people. And so that doesn't mean build a Christian nation. That doesn't mean build a Christian government, but that means building a government where people are treated accordingly to how God's word has prescribed.
Yeah.
And I think America does a great job at that.
Yeah.
Yeah. Like I think it's the best place to live and be able to have access to the gospel, to have access to a job, to like a way to raise your family, right? It's like I'm not trying to down on America, say where all these things are wrong. Yeah. Like I actually think it's the best nation on earth to live out this creation, fall, redemption, to understand that. And so don't hear us being like America sucks and we need to fix everything. Okay, let's talk about this last thing: receive, reject, redeem. Talk about that a little bit. Help us think through it.
Yeah, it's hard, right? And so one of our questions may help us talking about this a little bit. But it's like there are some things that we look at and we go, "Hey, you know what? Don't really see anything wrong with this. It's pretty good. I'm just going to receive that, enjoy that, promote it.
Yeah,
whatever." Reject. It's like, this thing is irredeemable. It is just bad. There might be a kernel of creation,
but there's not enough goodness
to outweigh the badness.
Yeah.
So when you think about pornography, there is a truth behind pornography in that God created sex and God created sex good, but this is so perverted.
Yeah.
And there's no one should watch it, right? Because there's no goodness in watching other people have sex.
I watch pornography because it reminds me of the goodness that God has created sex for.
You can't do that.
It's like, no, you don't.
Yeah,
that's not why you watch it.
Right. And so while there's you can see the sacredness behind it, it's so perverted that we reject it outright. Then redeem is those things that we either are going to use differently or we're going to see the good in them and reject the bad in them.
Yeah. So, and so you think about, go back to policy, right? Well, first off, one thing I want to say about this paradigm and this tool to think about is like that this is like personal to each person. Now there are things that on the whole we're going to agree, like pornography on the whole we're going to agree that this should be rejected. Right. Like that no reasonable response to that. And there's a lot of things on the whole that we're going to receive, right? And worship music, podcasts, books about theology, things like that. Not that we don't have to be thoughtful when we receive those things, but that we're going to say like this is not going to like hurt anyone, especially when it comes to sin. Right? It's not going to cause us to sin. But then you get to this redeem category, and that is going to be, there's going to be some disagreement in there. Should we redeem this thing or should we not? Should we watch this movie even though it's got this thing in it or not? And so it's like you may come down in a different place than someone else, and that's okay.
And for different reasons. I may have a particular struggle that makes me not be able to watch this, and you don't have that struggle.
That doesn't mean like, hey, we should, like, I'm saying, hey, we can redeem this thing, and you're saying like, no, I don't think we should. I should relent, right? If like we're picking a movie together, and I'm saying like, hey, let's watch, I don't know,
Titanic.
Right? And you're like, hey, I don't really want to because it's got some content in it that I don't really think is acceptable. I should not then be like,
you shouldn't force it.
We're doing it anyway.
Yeah.
I'll be like, no, it's like, oh, okay, I understand that. It's like, I should carry the burden for you. It's like Paul talks about in 1 Corinthians about the conscience. But then, so you think about policy, right? There's policies we should reject. Like they're bad policies.
Yeah.
Late-term abortion.
Yeah.
And no lack of abortion laws. We should reject that.
Yeah.
There's some policies that we can just like, this is good.
Yeah.
Murdering, right? Like,
Don't do it.
Don't do it. That's good policy.
Yeah.
Right. And so, but then there's things that's like, well, this is maybe not how particularly I would think about this thing or whatever, but it's like, it's not evil. It's not bad. And so it's like, there's actually,
we can disagree on tax policy.
There's like good in that. It's like, you think about Obamacare, right? It's like a lot of people were helped because of Obamacare.
I'm one of them.
And so it's like, we may like disagree with the idea of socialized medicine, but it's like, we can actually see like, oh, there's actually some good, there's some benefit to this. It's like, does that mean we have to just be rah Obamacare all the time? No, you can advocate for a different tax system or a different healthcare system. You think it's going to help more people. But the important thing is that you don't think about the policy by who proposed it or what side proposed it.
Right.
You think about, is this going to help people? Is this
good for our country?
Is this good for our country? Is this good for the world? It doesn't matter which side it came from.
Yeah. You know, one of the things I hear a lot from people is so-and-so just wants to destroy our country. And I just want to say, like, hey, their policy might lead to the destroying of our country.
But I don't think that's what they want.
They don't want that.
Yeah.
And
so you think about like, bless you. You think about your finances, right? There are things we should not spend our money on, right? Reject, like, don't spend your money on this thing.
Yeah.
Drugs, right? Like, anything illegal, really. But there's things like, this is good to spend your money on. Your house, food. Like we would never be like, hey, give to the church to the point where you can't afford groceries or you can't afford to pay your rent or you can't afford to pay your bills, right? We would never say that.
Yeah.
But then like, in the middle, right? It's like there are some things that you might buy that I might be like, I don't really understand like why he bought that. It's like, but you like someone spends bukus of money on like 5G super fast fiber internet.
Yeah.
And you're like, my regular internet works fine. I don't know why that person spends so much money. It's like that there's like disagreement in there. It's like you can redeem the use of your internet to something good. And
I'm on video calls all day long.
You know. And so this, I feel like more so than anything else really applies to the things we intake, not the way we applied. And so it's like the things, be thoughtful about the things you take in, right? Like, but I'm going to reject The Bachelor, right? Like I think The Bachelor is just
that's a hot take. Some people on here are going to be like, oh man.
I think the Golden Bachelor, I'm actually more into that. It's like a little more wholesome, a little less about sex, a little less about like these people are not getting drunk and like pulling each other's hair out or whatever. But it's like The Bachelor just gives like, I feel like, and The Bachelorette just gives such like a horrible, twisted view on romance and dating and marriage and sex and gender and all this stuff. It's like, I just think pretty much it's all terrible. Yeah. And someone can say, but Ryan, it's showing, marriage, it's showing monogamous relationships because only 2 of them get married at the end, even though they're all dating 25 people at the beginning. And, it's just like, for me, it's just like, hey, it's like the good does not outweigh the bad. I'm gonna reject that. Yeah. But you may be like, hey, we watch it in our house and we laugh at it and we are able to diagnose the things in it. It's like, then that's great for you. Yeah. But not great for me.
I remember when 50 Shades of Grey came out.
Oh my gosh.
I was pretty vocal about like no one should go watch this. And we had a whole group of women from our church go watch it.
Not our church,
different church. But I was just like dumbfounded.
Well, so this goes to a question that someone submitted. So let's talk about
let's
this
go to the
second.
questions.
So this is particularly about this thing. They said, is there a way for Christians to redeem TVs or movie with nudity? And like, this is a very funny parenthetical. I thought like particularly sexual nudity, not talking about Schindler's List.
Okay. I haven't seen Schindler's List since I was in high school.
I'm assuming there's maybe like naked dead bodies or something in it, or like they're getting into a gas chamber and they're naked. I don't know. I've also never seen it.
Well, you also think about, nude art.
Yeah,
like from the Renaissance.
Statue of David. Yeah. Right. It's like, so it's like specifically non-sexual nudity. I think maybe this is a hot take, but I think that particularly American culture, has swung too far in there. We sexualize all nudity.
Yeah.
Like we deem all nudity sexual.
Yeah.
And so it's like, as soon as you show any sort of nudity in a movie, it's like, boom, R rating. That's only for adults. But it's like some dude getting his brains blown out or whatever. We're like, that's cool for a teenager.
Yeah.
It's like, well, actually a guy getting his brains blown out is never a good thing or a beautiful thing. It's like, but actually human bodies are like good and beautiful and made in God's image. And so it's like, there's some trickiness there.
Some nuance.
Yeah. And so I do think there's a way. You go ahead and answer. I'm rambling.
No, I think one, particularly if you are struggling with lust, if it's a pain point for you, a struggle point for you,
don't do it.
Just don't even try.
You're tricking yourself
to think, oh, I can
redeem it.
Yeah. And so don't even
if
try.
you're addicted to pornography, if you have been addicted to pornography, if you're whatever.
Yeah. Don't do it. Even if it's going to make you just be lustful, don't do it.
Yeah.
So when we watch shows that have that in it, I have the remote in my hand, and the second the scene happens, I'm hitting the 10-second forward over and over and over again and fast forwarding through it. And I'm obviously going to see a couple little things as I try to get through there, but try not to. And usually my wife's sitting with me. And so that's just my personal how I try to do that, because I really want to watch the show, and it's like, why? I don't know why they got to put this in there, but I try to fast forward through it. But so can it be? I mean, it can be redeemed in the sense that, like, well, how are they portraying the sex? Maybe it's monogamous, marital sex.
Doesn't mean we should watch it.
Doesn't mean we should watch it, but like we can see that there's a kernel of truth. Like that's a good thing. But we should. It's like porn. We don't just need to watch this couple have sex. And so I would say most often we just need to kind of fast forward through it. Doesn't mean don't watch a show, but maybe fast forward through it.
Yeah, and I think certainly Christians can watch and enjoy movies that have nudity in them.
Yeah.
Like, I don't think that's like the cardinal sin of art.
Yeah.
Like having nudity or sexual content, right?
Yeah.
I don't think it's like, if it shows this thing, I can't watch it.
Yeah. And this was a little bit of my point about the chick flicks, is that when there's nudity in a show, it still may cause us to sin, but we're very aware of the problem. We see it; it's right in front. Like you can't miss it. The chick flick is more subtle, and it's teaching you things without you realizing it. That's what I'm saying. That's more dangerous.
It's changing your worldview without you realizing. Yeah, and so I think our tendency would probably be to want to redeem stuff with nudity more than we actually should.
Yes.
Like I think our guard should be higher than we think it is.
Yeah.
We should be more prudish than we actually are in practice.
It kind of reminds me of, like, every teenager comes to their youth pastor and says, Ryan, where's the line with my girlfriend?
How far is too far?
Yeah, it's like, you've already asked the wrong question.
Yeah. And so
and it's kind of like this. It's like, how much nudity can I watch in the show or whatever?
Yeah. And so, but I do think it's like playing with fire, right?
Yeah.
You got to be very careful. You're going to get burnt.
Right.
And specifically, like, if you struggle with specific sins or have struggled with specific sins in the past, not to be intaking it. Okay, so this is on a similar vein. This person asks, how do you navigate a topic that you feel is something to redeem, but another feels like it should be rejected? How do you navigate that disagreement?
Well, on one level, it depends on what it is. So it's like, if the disagreement is over pornography, like, that's kind of a closed fist issue.
Yeah.
Right? Like, you're wrong and you need to repent. If the issue is over whether or not, you should watch Saw, right, which is a very graphic, violent movie. Like, Christians can disagree about that, and we need to have charity and grace to say, "Hey, it's not for me, and it does bad things in my mind." Like, for me, I'll just give you. So, for example, for me, I really don't watch scary movies, particularly paranormal scary movies. They mess me up. I can't sleep. And for me, I just think that those paranormal things there's a sense of truth, like they're real.
You particularly mean like demonic?
Yeah.
Oh, or ghost. I'm like, I'll watch a ghost movie because ghosts ain't real.
No, it freaks me out, man.
No, ghost ain't real. That's fake.
No, I can't do it. And so I don't watch scary movies. But that's totally fine for you too. Now, let's kind of bring it more into the real world. Like, if someone gets a Ouija board and wants to play with it, my position is going to be, you should not do that, and we should not have a disagreement about whether or not you should just not do it.
Yeah.
You're playing with demons.
Yeah. It's a little bit like theological triage, right?
Yeah,
There's the absolute don'ts. There's the we can disagree on this and still have fellowship. And then there's like we should actually never do that. Like, or this is fine, right? That would be the other end. It's this is fine. We can disagree on this, or it's like, this is very bad.
Yeah.
And it's like, and obviously like the question is about what if someone classifies one in the middle and you classify it in the reject.
Yeah, you just got to have honest, open conversations and the sense of community, and you got to be willing to listen.
Yeah.
You got to be willing to say, maybe I'm wrong.
Yeah. And I think the First Corinthians sense, like you got to be willing to carry the burden of the weaker brother.
Yeah.
Right. And so it's like, if the eating the meat sacrificed to idols is going to hurt your conscience, I'm going to abstain from doing it, even if I think it's okay.
Let me make an argument. You can tell me if you disagree.
Okay.
I think that's true about the weaker brother. So the guy who's struggling with don't watch the movie with nudity in it or whatever. But I don't think that's necessarily about the brother who's being a Pharisee.
No, I think that's true.
Right. It's like, hey, if this guy's being a Pharisee and he's like, you shouldn't watch The Chosen. Right, because he's all mad about the Catholic influence in it or whatever.
Oh, yeah. Because Jesus doesn't have any brothers.
He actually
bring Jesus' brothers in the show.
So I went back and looked at this. They are mentioned earlier in season. When he goes back to his hometown in Nazareth, he's like, he talked to his mom and he's like, why aren't my brothers here? And she's like, they have a hard time with this or whatever. So there's one time they were mentioned.
Okay. Hashtag where Jesus' brothers.
Yeah, but it is weird that they're not there taking care of Mary.
But yeah, and so I think that's true because that's Paul's other point in 1 Corinthians, right? It's like, I can't remember what chapter it is. It's like 13 or something. Yeah. But he's like, don't carry the burden of the weaker brother, but also don't be holding it over the head of everyone else too, like making them do it because you think it's wrong.
So
or whatever.
Legalism is an issue where you're like holding as the godly standard what people should do and not do, and also it's an issue if you're like forcing people to do things that they conscience forbids.
I have friends that are Christians that watch shows with nudity in them, right? I should not be like, castigating them for doing that. Yeah. Can I disagree with them?
Sure.
Absolutely I can.
Yeah. Or I can say it's just not for me.
Yeah. And I say you shouldn't be watching that. But if they've come to a different conclusion, it's like, hey, it's not my job to sanctify them in that way if I think that's the right way.
Yeah.
And so you can healthily disagree with each other on this. And it doesn't change our standing as believers. Yeah. Right? Like people who are followers of Jesus disagree on what movies to watch, what policies to enact, how to spend their money, whatever, in a multitude of different ways. All right, last question, and this is one I had from listening to the sermon, but this is not my question. I didn't write it in. What does the Bible mean when it talks about elemental spirits? Are these demonic and something that we see today? So Colossians 2:8, it talks about the elemental spirits and the principles of man, or something like that.
Taken captive by the philosophy of
human the philosophies tradition. Of man,
yeah, human tradition or elemental spirits. So in kind of diving in, the translation's a little weird. We were looking at that earlier. The word spirit isn't necessarily there. So
there's no pneuma. There's no version of the word pneuma, like spirit.
And so there's some debate. As I was kind of reading about, there's some debate over the meaning. Some people think that it is a demonic sense or presence or whatever that's trying to lead men to do this. Other people think it's more just like the human kind of way of thinking, which is also in a sense demonic or at least fallen or corrupted by sin. And so either way, it's bad.
Yeah, the word right there that's translated elemental spirits is sometimes is a lot of times through the rest of Paul's writings translated just like the fundamental elements or the fundamental principles. Yeah. And so it's we talk about like the spirit of the age, and so it's like I think more that's the sense in which Paul was writing. It's like kind of the spirit of the age. So right now, the spirit of the age would be like hyper individualism, love who you love, postmodernity. If it makes you feel good, it can't be wrong. That's kind of the spirit of the age. But then I think the spirit of the age was uniquely pagan, uniquely demonic, right? Yeah. They were worshiping demons, and also
in a sense, I would say anything that is not of Christ is demonic. Like anything that is not...
I don't know that I'd go that far.
Well, I'm saying anything that is not of the seed of the woman is of the seed of this. Like it's either one. Like
it's like I'm not demonic, right?
Well,
it's
no,
but I have sin that could be informed by I could be taken captive by the elemental spirits.
That's what I'm saying. Yeah,
but that doesn't mean I'm taken over by a demon.
No, I'm saying the what's behind those things is a demonic influence.
Yeah, I don't particularly think that's true all the time. Like, I think just fallen humanity is enough to mess it up on its own. We don't need to be influenced by demons.
No, I don't mean necessarily actively influenced by demons. I'm saying the worldview, the psychology, whatever is layers behind that is of the demonic. And this, not like Satan's coming to tempt you. I'm just saying whatever is of the world is of the prince of the power of the air.
Yeah, but there's no secular sacred divide.
Oh,
so I tend to think sometimes we can ascribe too much power to demons and Satan.
No, I agree.
They're not omniscient. They're not omnipresent. They're not all powerful. They're not all knowing. And so it's like, I think human beings are bad enough to mess things up on their own. I don't need to ascribe to demons what can just be ascribed to pride or to
no, I understand what you're saying.
hubris, or it's like so I don't want to go ahead and because then it's like we're just on the lookout for it, you know. So it's like, is this demons? Is this demons?
Yeah, no, I don't mean
it's
an
like, are there demons?
demon.
Are there demons behind this? You know, it's like, I think it's just like, no, it's like the spirit of the age is just that we're hyper individualists. Christians have pushed that worldview. Non-Christians have pushed that worldview, and so it's just like humans mess this up, right? And so it's like, don't be transformed by or conformed to the spirit of the age. Don't be taken captive by the human wisdom or the fundamental elements of the thinking of your time. Be transformed by the renewing of your mind. That's what I would say.
Got it.
All right. Any final words about your worldview in this supersized episode?
Have a Christian one.
Have a Christian world, a gospel worldview.
A biblical one.
The gospel changes everything.
There we go.
Thanks for joining us for the recap. We hope this conversation has encouraged you to keep striving to make Jesus essential in every aspect of your life. If you aren't part of our church family, we'd love to meet you on a Sunday morning. We gather for worship at 10:30 a.m. And for more information, you can always go to myfellowship.church. Thanks for listening. Be blessed.